Welcome to the Pat O'Donnell Socialist Republican Forum podcast. We're going to reflect on the recent general election in the 26 counties of the Republic of Ireland. Two experts here tonight with us, Barry Murray and Eamonn Keenan, both from County Fermanagh, which, because although they don't live in the Republic of Ireland, they live in County Fermanagh, and have a deep insight into what happens in the Republic of Ireland, but at the same time, very useful to get a view from just a certain distance, although not a great distance, and two people that are intimately aware of what's happening in the Republic of Ireland. So let's begin there. So Barry Murray, could you tell us, please, your initial thoughts on the recent general election in the Republic of Ireland?
One of the notable things about the general election in the South was that the very low turnout. Less than 60%. That means that, something around the figure of 40% of people don't even think that it's worth their while or their business to go out and vote. Now, that says something about what people think, must say something about what people think about the present bourgeois election system. Even the young people didn't go out and vote in great numbers either. Now, that could be a lot of reasons, because young people are away out of the country, and young people at universities and stuff didn't get home to vote and whatever. But I also think that young people recognise, that these type of elections is not doing anything for them, and they can see the price of housing, they can see a poor healthcare and stuff like that, and they realise that nothing has changed, and they haven't seen anything change in their lifetime. And no doubt they hear their parents saying the same thing. Take the like of Sinn Féin, who should have been the up and coming political party, and is sort of seen as being on the left and a threat to the sort of the bourgeois power system and the ruling class. Okay, they had a reasonable election, but not the type of election that's the type of vote that is going to take to change anything. Not that indeed it would change anything anyway.
Well, thanks, Barry. I'll just tell you, I'll come back to you in a few moments. Eamonn, what was your initial thoughts? Maybe anything different? Could you add something on to what Barry has told us?
Well, I suppose so Barry mentioned Sinn Féin there, and they probably expected to do a lot better, but there was a lot of soft centre left type of TDs elected in Dáil. There was independents, obviously Sinn Féin, and a few others. I'm not saying they're going to be that radical, but that block is there. There is a significant number of people to the sort of centre left, soft centre left. The other noticeable thing was there was a large number of far right candidates standing on the immigration ticket, anti-immigration, and they all collapsed. So that is a positive out of it. The majority of those did not make any headway, which in my view is a good thing. The other thing, I suppose, when we look at it is, we look at the state of the country, and the result of the vote was with the same old. You've got Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil back in. So the system itself, although people talk about wanting change, and that was the whole message that went through the election, there was no change. They got the exact same result, as we did before. Those two parties have created the coalition to stay in power and keep things going the way they have been, unfortunately. So that's a few things I have noticed.
Very good, thank you. Maybe then we could take a few minutes here just to elaborate or tease out some of those issues. Could I go back to you, Barry, and ask you then, why do you think, what is the reason for the low turnout? Now, you've given me a few thoughts initially, but maybe explore it a little bit more deeply than that, please.
I think, Tommy, there's obviously a degree of detachment and sort of apathy from the whole political system. I think even people sort of vote sometimes, and even when they're voting, they're saying, like, this is not going to change anything. But they sort of feel it's their duty to go and vote anyhow. But that's even those who do vote. But 40%, as I said earlier, of people decided that, and that's only 40% of those who are registered to vote. There could be another 10 or 15 or 20% for all we know that's not even registered to vote. The they don't see any results from voting in the present bourgeois system. And when we have the historical proof of it there for the last 200 years, since the beginning of the establishment of capitalism, people know that at the end of the day, it's a system, as Connolly said, parliaments are but the committees of the rich to manage their affairs. And people still see poverty, they still see poor health system, they still see no housing, but in spite of all the promises that the ruling class have been given,
And one last question then, Barry, about that. How does it reflect on the legitimacy of the state and its government, do you think?
Well, I mean, you have somebody like the monk, almost been elected.
There was a man called Jerry Hutch.
Jerry Hutch almost been elected, but for the way the votes fell, he probably didn't attract transfers. But I mean,
and just for our viewers, Jerry Hutch has been named now. He hasn't been convicted. They have to be fair about this. But he's been named as a gangster in Dublin.
Yeah, he's been. I mean, he's at the very least, clear criminal associations, and named as such, and sort of condemned by the media, and yet he almost gets elected in the national elections. So what does that say in itself about the whole electoral system? What does it say about what people think, especially in Dublin Central, where there's a very poverty-stricken areas, and that's the best they saw.
Specifically, then, why do you think the young didn't turn out in numbers, Barry?
Well, I suppose it's hard. That's a more difficult one, I suppose, in the sense that do young people see the system as something that benefits them?
You think perhaps younger people are in need of housing? Maybe
well, I mean, that's it. I mean, young people are on a treadmill, and they're trying to pay rent, and they're trying to save for a house. And I mean, houses are completely out of their reach, no matter what they do. I mean, they might be paying $3,000 a month in rent. How are they going to possibly ever save money out of $3,000 a month to buy a house? I mean, it's practically impossible. And as for a health service, although young people probably don't see the need for a health service as much as older people, but at the same time, I mean, they see their parents and their grandparents not able to avail of even the basic health care. And if they do, it costs them a clean fortune.
Of course, health affects younger people too, young families.
Well, it does, but maybe not to the same extent, just as the older generation, but still.
Of course, but still, I mean, to care for children and maybe pregnancies and issues like that still affect,
Yeah.
And then maybe just a few, before I go to Eamonn, maybe you tell me a few thoughts on Sinn Féin's performance.
Well, I mean, Sinn Féin are probably expected to do a lot better. And they've probably done well enough, given the attacks on them.
Their vote did drop 5%.
It dropped 5%. But I mean, they did well enough, considering that the ruling class done all in their power to destroy them. And they had been even lower in the polls before the elections. Their vote had dropped significantly, but they brought it back up again. So I suppose that they did all right. But I mean, I would argue, I mean, that really is a moot point either way as far as I'm concerned. Because, I mean, what you're talking about here is a bourgeois election system, to me, for the powerful and wealthy. I mean, it doesn't really matter if Sinn Féin, got millions of votes and was in a bourgeois parliament like that. It's going to be the same result at the end of the day.
Fair enough. Listen, can I just then move on to yourself, Eamonn? You mentioned the fact that the centre left, the soft left, now the sort of easygoing left, have about 65 seats in the new Dáil. Do you think is there a case here for a centre left pact, or do you think it will have any effect anyway, even if it was to be formed?
Well, I think it should definitely be looked at. I'm not saying the 65 seats. It should definitely be looked at whether they could work together, whether they will work together, whether they'll even think of creating a pact. I don't know, but there has to be a challenge to the status quo, to the current Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil regime, as basically is. You know, they've been in power in this country since in the 26 counties to the foundation of the state. There has to be some sort of challenge. Now, I'm not saying a pact by the centre left is going to be radical or create any sort of system change or sort of radical change that we would need, but at least some sort of challenge. So I think it needs to be looked at the very least. There would be some fairly good people within that pact. You know, you've got some good people there, so you never know. It might change the dynamics, which is what's needed.
It's been said that one thing about that, Eamonn, it's been said that it'd be imperative for any such pact to promise not to enter into any type of coalition with the two right-wing parties of Fine Gael and Fine Gael.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. They couldn't be going back into the right-wing pact with them. If it would have to be centre-left and leaning as far left as possible to get the results and the issues sorted for the ordinary working class people. You know, we can't fool ourselves and think that these far-right parties are going to do anything in the interest of the working class. It will only serve their interests, the ruling class, the capitalists, the financiers, and we know this. So if we have any hope at all, it's going to have to be left-wing for the people.
And any chance of attracting the 40% that doesn't vote?
I think so. I think if there is a chance of attracting the youth, it's going to have to be left-wing policies.
Yeah.
It's going to have to be housing. It's going to have to be education. It's going to have to be investment, infrastructure, but not this. What do they call it? Direct foreign investment from the big multinationals, which yes give jobs, but they extract all the profit out. That's no good. They're not putting anything back into the company. It's not into the country.
Yeah, and it poses an enormous risk in case if they did happen to pull out the economy.
Oh, they could pull out in the morning. You look at Donald Trump there is talking already about making America great again and bringing these businesses back, lowering the corporation tax. So the system that they have there and that the country is currently relying on is very flawed, and it's on a knife edge. You know, at the whim of an American president, could be all pulled away. It's not sustainable. It's not stable, and it's not what a state should build itself on.
Of course. And then again, because we were talking about a pact on the left, but there was a pact effectively on the far right.
Yeah.
It seems to have collapsed. It has collapsed. It hasn't manifested itself. In fact, they're factional and fighting within them. Have you any idea, or what's your thoughts on, or why do you think they didn't do better?
Well, I think there was a lot of good work done by left-wing socialist activists on the ground, especially around Dublin, to counteract their hate speech and their ideology, their right-wing ideology, which was anti-immigrants, and they were trying to confuse people that this was the working class, But I think there was a lot of good work done by the activists on the ground in Dublin and even throughout the country. As well as that, I suppose that the whole thing was that the Ukrainians were over here getting money and they were getting handouts, but I think Coveney pulled that plug on that before the elections. That took a bit of steam out of that as well. So there's different factors there. And I think some people seen through their hatred. Not everybody's. A lot of people seen through that it was just a hatred ideology. Like, people aren't stupid. Some people might buy into it for a while, but they'll soon realise the true colours of these people and what they're about, and that has to give us hope.
I think that's an excellent point, Eamonn. Never to underestimate the good sense of working people, and decency of working people. I think that's imperative. So then, listen, I'm going to ask both of you this final question. Both of you have mentioned participatory democracy, and I just see today there's a very good article from the Communist Party of Ireland being carried today in the Morning Star, and it concludes by pouring cold water on the prospects of electoralism, but mentions the fact, which I would suggest is probably participative democracy you're talking about, that the left needs to engage with the unions and community groups and different local initiatives like that. So could maybe ask you, Barry, first your views on participatory democracy, and then I'll come back to you, Eamonn, if you don't mind.
Well, I think that
Start, Barry, tell us what you mean by participatory democracy.
Well, participatory democracy, in basic terms, is that all of the people of Ireland have a say in what happens in the government, and that actually the government is directed by people's community councils from the ground up. I mean, democracy, decentralized democracy, is probably a more simple term for it, in the sense that democracy is given to the people in the local areas, and who know what's happening in the local areas, who knows what's needed in the local areas, and that's basically it. And it feeds up into the local councils and then feeds on up into the national level. I mean, this has been done all over the world, and very, very spectacularly and very successfully in Kerala, an Indian state in India, in India itself, has done this very successfully. And I mean, it's there for anybody to follow. I mean, it's also done successfully in Cuba and other countries. I mean, people need to understand that bourgeois democracy is not going to solve the problems. It's not going to end inequality and exploitation. It's not going to end, bad housing, expensive housing. It's not going to end a two-tier health system or a one-tier health system where you pay for what you get and that's it. If you can't pay, you pay.
Is that why? Because bourgeois democracy is dependent and upholds capitalism?
Well, that's it. I mean, it's. Eamonn mentioned earlier on there about foreign direct investment. I mean, they call the shots. I mean, the corporates call the shots. I mean, they'll say to the government, "Well, listen, you can't do that because here's why. And if you don't do what we want you to do, well, then sorry, we can't afford to finance your elections. We can't afford to be the corporation tax. We have to go elsewhere." And they're a force of their own. They're a force outside government.
Of course.
And have no interest whatsoever in what the working class needs. And the working class, let's not forget, the working class is the majority in Ireland, as they are in most countries. And they have to come to understand that they have the power. And just one final point on that. If we talk about, bourgeois elections and all the rest of it, and the present parliaments and all that they don't do anything, that's one side of it. And parliamentary electoralism on its own will never achieve anything, as I've said. But what we need to do is involve ourselves in radical revolutionary electoralism. And that is to say that we use the parliaments for the publicity, we use the parliaments to expose the inability to serve the people, and we build at the same time, we build our community councils and our community people's councils on the ground. That twin track system is vital. Otherwise, nothing will ever change, not for the next 200 years.
I see you shaking your head, Eamonn. Maybe you'd give us a few thoughts as well.
Yeah, well, Barry's given a very good explanation of the participatory democracy, but what we currently have is representative democracy. So Barry has shown and talked about participatory democracy, giving the people power, and the people making the decisions in their own area, and that feeding on through the next level and the next level. And that'll be a continuous process. That'll be happening all the time. So you'd be empowering people will be making decisions, that have ideas, be bringing it forward, things will be happening in their own area. But the representative democracy system that we have is, you want something, you go to your elected politician, TD, councillor, MLA, and he gives you an old nod and a wink, he'll sort it out. Don't worry, I'll sort it out for you, pal. And you might hear tell of him, he might get sorted out, or 90% of the time he'll probably not. So anyway, even if he does get it sorted out, that's taking the power away from you. He's got the power, they've got the power. The people have no power then. You're on the begging bowl thing, you're looking for this done or that done. So what Barry's talking about, that empowers the people to make change. And as that process happens, it will build a confidence, it will build a network of people, and that will be the force for change, I think.
Excellent, brilliant. So maybe just before we conclude here, last thoughts, Barry?
Well, I think as I referred to earlier, there's a 40% out there in the population, north and south, and I think that percentage of the population needs to be targeted by socialist Republicans in particular, and anyone on the left that has any ideas on that. They need that. That's your base. That could be a very large part of your base to begin to build a participatory democracy, to begin to build a decentralization of democracy. There's a base to start on. Obviously, they don't accept the present system, so let's present them with a new system. Sure. Let's start somewhere. You know what I mean? And I think that's vital. Otherwise, we're going to be sitting here in 20 or 30 years' time saying the exact same things with no change.
So, Eamonn, just optimism. You wouldn't write the whole situation off just yet, I hope.
No, I wouldn't write it off yet. A lot can happen in a short period of time, as we all know. Like, you know, or it could take a week, take a month, take a year, take 10 years. But change is continuous. It's a process that has to be built on. And if we're not building for it, then it's not going to happen in our interests. So if we want the change to happen in our interests, we need to be building for it. And participatory democracy is one way of doing that. And it not only will be building, the community, the people will be building with us. And that's us embedded in the community. And, you know, that's a force for change.
I think on that note, comrades, we'll draw it to an end. Thank you very much, Barry Murray. Thank you. Eamonn Keenan, thank you for an excellent presentation. Thank you, man.
Thanks very much, Tommy.
Thanks, Tommy.